In order to get the hostages out, I think we can say pretty confidently, after more than 650, I've already counted, that for the third time we've captured Khan Yunis, for the fourth time Rafah, for the fifth time the central camps, and whatever other camps there are. The only things that have come out in recent times, or in the past half year, are bodies. And it seems that the only way to bring back those last 20, apparently the last 20 who are still alive, and the 30 bodies, is through diplomatic negotiations, as unpleasant, unappealing, and discouraging as that may sound. But that's the reality.
Kobi is an expert in American political history at University of Haifa. This morning, with Kobi, we'll try to find out if Israel is just a puppet in the American puppet theater that's trying to control the Middle East and, in fact, the whole world. One of your recent tweets, Kobi, dealt with the fact that Trump has about 60 days until the Nobel Prize Committee convenes, and by then he basically needs to come up with results like a peace agreement, the release of hostages, and so on. Do you really think that the leader of the free world, who is responsible for world peace, is ultimately preoccupied with trivialities like prizes and various forms of recognition?
First and foremost, it is absolutely crucial to understand that this is by no means a trivial matter. In fact, its potential implications are far-reaching and profound. What initially appears to be a minor detail could, in reality, escalate into a significant challenge, a complex problem requiring extensive resources, or even a foundational shift in circumstances. The ramifications of this situation are substantial, potentially leading to unforeseen consequences, necessitating considerable adjustments, or even fundamentally altering the current state of affairs. Therefore, it is imperative to approach this with the utmost seriousness and a comprehensive understanding of its potential magnitude, as it could indeed evolve into something of considerable importance and impact.
Dear viewers, please note, there is currently an escalation in attempts to silence Tove Channel. Naftali Bennet is suing Tove Channel for no less than 250,000 shekels. A gag lawsuit by a former prime minister against an independent media outlet in a democratic country. This must not happen. If he wins this lawsuit, the channel, Tove Channel, might be shut down, and that's why we're raising 500,000 shekels so we can keep bringing you bold content and fight those who are trying to silence us. So, our request is, support us. All the details are in the link below the player, and we will be grateful for your support.
To compromise your actions just to get the Nobel Prize could actually harm vital interests of not only of the United States, but also of its allies. What do you think is happening here? Is this about an award for good work, or is it some kind of attempt to align the whole system just to get the prize?
Like the Americans say, why not both of them? First of all, regarding his narrative, throughout his campaign, he kept saying that he's a president who will end wars, not a president who will start wars. By the way, that's also the position his nationalist wing, the MAGA crowd, tried to pin him to, especially on the issue of dismantling the immigration program. He came back and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I promise to cancel the nuclear program." From his perspective, the strike results were a perfect victory. He effectively used American military force, which at least set back the nuclear program, if not canceled it, as he claims. He didn't remain in an endless war. I mean, I like to say, not a single hair of his eyebrow was harmed. For a pilot to be in such a state of terror that lasts about 20 to 25 minutes, President Trump is basically establishing his doctrine here of peace through strength. So, in the context of how he manages the world and how that resonates with the voters' feelings, we're completely aligned. But how?
Will this actually influence ending the war in Gaza? Are we Basically expected to see some kind of American pressure that pushes us into a corner, maybe forces us to compromise against our own interests, just to wrap things up, to make it in time for the 60 days before the Nobel?
Let me finish the tail end of the previous point, then I'll answer your question. I said there are two things, and the second, equally important, is that he really does have a narcissistic personality. He also feels like he's on some kind of mission after surviving 3 assassination attempts. God chose him for this task. To wrap up, is there any contradiction in what he's referring to? Now, regarding the interests, look, at the end of the day, from the moment he was elected, his pressure has been constant and ongoing, so that the hostage deal will come to an end. Why? Mainly because the issue of the hostages has touched him deeply. It's become a top priority for him. And we've seen his administration deal with this matter, I would say, almost disproportionately compared to the scope of all the other tasks they have. In order to get the hostages out, I think we can say with pretty high certainty, after more than 650, I've already counted, that this is the 3rd time Khan Yunis has been captured, the 4th time Rafah, and the 5th time the central camps, the middle camps, or whatever they're called. The only things that have been coming back lately, or in the past 6 months, are bodies. And apparently, the only way to bring back those last 20, most likely the last 20 who are still alive, and the 30 bodies, is through diplomatic negotiations, as unpleasant, uncomfortable, and discouraging as that may sound. But that's the reality. Now, as long as Hamas doesn't give in.
Doctor, let's now carefully move on to this next important question, the issue of voluntary evacuation of the population of
Gaza? You can't achieve a voluntary evacuation of Gaza's population before the event is over. To end the event, someone needs to fund the cost of establishing the BOT project, build, operate, transfer. For this to happen, those who are supposed to put in money for the first time in history, not philanthropic money, but real financial investment, meaning RY will have to sort out the money, are mainly the Gulf states. The Gulf states have said they won't be able to get involved until the campaign in Gaza comes to some sort of conclusion. In order for us to reach the end of the campaign in Gaza, we need to see some sort of process of removing Hamas. There aren't too many people left in the Hamas leadership who need to be taken out, and ultimately, to bring in the new forces. Under American auspices, Trump treats this issue as his own real estate. He was once asked by a journalist, "By what law do you decide to take these territories?" And he replied, "By our law." So Trump sees this as a business opportunity, and he will be personally involved, together with Jared Kushner, who refers to it as a beautiful piece of real estate, and with Wickoff and others. You can't start a reconstruction process, which, according to what they're saying, is supposed to take between 10 and 20 years until the war is over. Who's going to put money in while the war is still going on?
But does this actually mean, according to Trump's view, that the ones who will run the strip after the war ends will really be those forces from the Gulf states?
Yes, apparently at first, some sort of Palestinian force, one way or another, with the idea being to basically replant the education system in Gaza. We've seen the textbooks, which are anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist. The ones who have done a very impressive job in recent years are the Gulf states. They've removed all the anti-Semitic content from the curriculum. And they're educating a new generation based on values that aren't pathological hatred of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. This is a process that will take a generation.
So what you're saying, if I sum up what you're saying, in Trump's view, the war in Gaza needs to end so it will be possible to carry out a voluntary evacuation of the population. He thinks there will be more massive immigration, that the Gulf states will manage the Strip, and in the end, what will happen after they manage the Strip after 10 or 20 years?
This is the BOT plan that Professor Felsman came up with, which talks about basically dividing the Strip into two parts, the eastern and the western. The western part would actually be used for Chinese-style condominiums, 50 stories high, and a full 24/7 monitoring system for people, social scoring like they have in China. That means there would be an ID card based on facial recognition, eye patterns, biometric fingerprints, so you can track people to make sure that during this period there's no risk of terrorism. The apartment will be theirs to rent for 25 years, and after 25 years it will officially be registered in their name in the land registry, something that doesn't exist in Gaza to perpetuate refugee status. So there will be an organized land registry, properties will have minimal documentation, and after 25 years they'll be transferred to the building owners. And they'll get jobs in one of three main sectors: agriculture, high-tech, or tourism, which will be built closer to the sea, the eastern side, where Trump's hotels and casinos will be established, providing people with a livelihood, according to this theory. There won't be private transportation, only underground public trains. It will be built as a green model, and the idea is that, in the end, whoever puts up this money, who has to build the residences, hotels, and entertainment sites, after 25 or 30 years will hand it over to the next administration. The plan is clear, it's understandable.
An autonomous government in Gaza.
Exactly. It's a city-state. The ones who will run it are its owners. Its owners are those who put in the money, which is mainly Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and so on. They will be the owners of the city, and it will be a city with a different status. It won't be a fully sovereign state. There will be a police force, similar to what happens in Qatar, a foreign police force, made up of officers who have no affiliation to the place, and they will enforce the law. The idea is that whoever invests money, this is a business investment, they will see profits in real time and will get a full return on their investment after 25 or 30 years. The assets will be handed over to the next political entity that will exist in 25 to 30 years after a generation has undergone re-education. I'm not promising this will succeed, but I do know. I interviewed Professor Felsman in August, even before Trump was elected. I do know that this is the Trump administration's plan itself. The first stage discusses voluntary departure. They plan to apply it to 1 million people, which I estimate will only happen at the war's end. This is also managed in Israel as part of proposed processes to allow, post-war, a population wanting to stay under the set framework to remain under biometric supervision in the Strip, with dignified employment and housing.
I understand. Kobi, I want to ask you something. Setting aside Israel's interests, good or bad for Israel, there are many aspects to consider. You're basically, if I understand correctly, saying, we Americans, we want to nurture to develop Gaza as a candidate to join the Abraham Accords in the future, which, as I understand it, we are currently, at least hopefully, moving toward a significant expansion of these accords, with 6 more countries expected to join.
Exactly. This is actually the second leg of the Nobel Prize. Yes, the first one is the release of the hostages, and the second is the expansion of the Abraham Accords, for which he didn't initially receive the Nobel Prize. When we're talking about adding actual enemy states, like Lebanon, like Syria, Indonesia, the largest Muslim country, Oman, maybe Kuwait. And this is also what President Trump says. It's a done deal, waiting for the right moment to make a big announcement. 2 months isn't a time frame that seems impossible to achieve, and if you set a tight schedule, you could very well see within those 60 days the event coming together. ultimately leading to a White House ceremony with a broad Abraham Accords agreement. Then you get to the Oslo Committee in September, where he not only freed the hostages and signed an expanded Abraham Accords, but also brokered peace between Pakistan and India, and something no one talked about this week between Congo and Rwanda. Truly, the president of world peace.
What are the latest developments and the underlying reasons for this critical shift in policy?
Estimates, the Americans used between 15 to 20% of their interceptors from reserve batteries to provide us with air defense during the 12-day war with the Iranians. I assume it's very possible that there's even a mix of factors here, but the main significant thing is that right now, we're close to our red line. This is what is called national security. And we can't keep launching these interceptors, which should be a big red flag for us as well, because in such a scenario, we've also heard that our own interceptor stockpile, at least according to foreign sources, has been massively depleted, and that actually makes sense, considering the need to absorb thousands of UAVs and missiles. The implication right now is that the Ukrainians won't get the precision weapons that are supposed to help them deal with the Russians. Some would argue that this is also another means by which Trump is trying to force the sides into war. On one hand, he imposes sanctions on the Russians, and on the other, he denies the Ukrainians' defensive capabilities. So, in a way, he's pushing both sides toward a solution that neither of them actually wants, but which, as I said, is very much at the core of President Trump's agenda to try and bring conflicts and wars to an end.
So, who guarantees us, within this grand vision of President Trump, which, as you said, he has a very clear vision and he sees himself as an emissary, and up until now, at least from our perspective, he's been on the right side of history, but who is actually safeguarding Israel's interests against? A president who comes in with such a well-defined agenda, a global, economic agenda that undoubtedly serves American interests, but may not necessarily serve Israeli interests one-to-one. Who can guarantee this won't lead to a new wave of terror in Gaza? If such a wave arises, who can guarantee control? Who can guarantee we're not bringing new Arab countries into the picture, countries that will put more pressure on us and gain leverage, even after Trump is gone? Who can guarantee any of this?
The answer is simple. No one can guarantee us that. The answer that follows is that the U.S. president is elected by American citizens and serves U.S. goals and interests. In the Israel-U.S. relationship, people don't like it when I say this, but it's the truth. We are the protected party, and the U.S. is the leading country. We've seen tensions between American presidents and Israeli prime ministers. For example, David Ben-Gurion in 1956 and Eisenhower's demand to withdraw immediately from Sinai occupation. Then you have Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, who, let's not forget, 65 or 70 days ago, brought him from Budapest, sat him down on a small chair, and told him, "I'm starting tomorrow morning," a process of relations, negotiations with the Iranians. The Americans, they're the big bear, and we're the little rabbit. I'm trying to frame it as best I can to get the point across. Right now, Israel has no ability, and this is a common mistake. They say, okay, let's disconnect. We don't need America. Then there are those who say, let's look for another partner. On the eve of October 7th, some suggested the Chinese, some France or England. I'll set aside those outlandish claims. After October 7th, we can all reach a broad and clear consensus. It's impossible and not feasible to rely on any of those so-called great powers mentioned. The question is, okay, what about the idea of the people that dwells alone? Can we actually manage just fine on our own? So I'm saying that all it takes is a single decision without an American veto in the Security Council, especially if it's under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which actually has teeth. And Israel could unravel at a dizzying pace with such decisions. I'm talking about decisions in the previous administration, like halting arms shipments, whether with the president's knowledge or without the previous president's knowledge. Personally, I believe he didn't say he was a Zionist president for nothing. I think a large part of what was done was carried out in the Pentagon by officials, like that official who leaked the plan to strike Iran. And that's exactly the point.
Which is probably something we'll have to leave for our next conversation, because unfortunately we have to wrap up, even though this discussion is truly fascinating. But we'll have to save something for next time, and I think we really need to talk about it, because this mindset of we depend on the Americans and ultimately the market decides is a perspective that, among other things, led us to October 7th, and it could be very dangerous. Speaking of which, we're seeing the new Democratic candidate for mayor of New York, and I'd also love to talk with you about that next time. The changes happening within American society and how that's going to affect global geopolitics. I really appreciate this conversation. It was fascinating to hear your analysis, and I'd like to invite our viewers again to click the link below the player to support us so we can continue to create quality and interesting content for you, like the conversation you just watched.
Dear viewers, please note, there is currently an escalation in attempts to silence Tove Channel. Naftali Bennet is suing Tove Channel for no less than 250,000 shekels. A gag lawsuit by a former prime minister against an independent media outlet in a democratic country. This must not happen. If he wins this lawsuit, the channel, Tove Channel, might be shut down. And that's why we're raising 500,000 shekels so we can keep bringing you bold content and fight those who are trying to silence us. So, our request is, support us. All the details are in the link below the player, and we will be grateful for your support.